Rook endings are one of the most complicated types of positions to play in chess. Well, of course, it goes with several pawns on each side, but before we get in there, we have to know some positions with a rook and one pawn versus bare rook. Now, those positions are all very predictable, and they are known as won or drawn. There is no one-side advantage, has advantage or not, but they are not that simple, and it's very important for us to know what is the result, because a lot of times you have endgame positions and you want to go to the position where you have rook and pawn and opponent has a rook, or you have just rook and opponent has rook and pawn, and you have to know before you go in there whether it's won or drawn or lost or whatever. So let's get some elementary position. Well, for example, king on a6, pawn on b6, and the rooks on f8 and g7. This position is dead drawn. It's a dead draw. And the reason why, because white absolutely cannot make any progress. Black goes back and forth with a rook, and check, white goes to a8, and so on. White can never make a progress. So that's why it's a draw. So almost all positions with a rook and knight pawns are drawn. Well, with a pawn on 6th rank. It goes also for the rook pawn, which is drawn even easier. However, if we move and get white a bishop pawn on c6, this is the position. This position is winning for white, no matter whose move is it. Actually, it's not even... you can tell that there is no difference whose move is it, because black's rook cannot lift back rank because of the checkmate threat. So black has to sit and wait, go, for example, rook h8, and here how white wins. Rook check, king c8, and rook a7. Now they are threatening checkmate, and after king b8, c7 check, king c8 and rook a8 check. You see, this is easily won. The difference between knight pawn and a bishop pawn, because after rook b7, king a8, rook a7, king b8, white does not have a square to the left, okay, because the a file is the corner file. So this is draw. So same goes for a central pawn. It's easily won for white. They just go rook c7 check, rook b7 check, and make a queen. Now, those are very easy and very basic positions of the rook ending. Now, suppose we have position like this, with the white pawn on b5. We know this is the b pawn, knight pawn. It's a draw. All you have to do, go rook f8, king b8, and stay back there, and white will never make a progress. However, if the pawn, there is a bishop pawn, but you are not on a back rank, but you are one step up, now you know that your opponent will try to win, will go rook h6 and rook b6 and try to kick you back on a back rank. Or even if position is like this, rook and h7, king on b8. Here is the main rule. You should know this rule, and you will never make a mistake. A rule is simple. Do not let your opponent's king go ahead of his pawn, ahead of its pawn. What you have to do, that's the only move that's gonna make a draw, rook f6, and you see that king cannot go forward, and if pawn goes to c6, then you go rook f1 back. And now you see that white's king will not be able to hide from the multiple checks. So this is a draw. So if white gives checks, they can make no progress, like h7 check, king b8. Otherwise, rook b1, rook c1, and black has a perpetual check. White cannot win at all. So this is the basics here. You remember the rule of the sixth rank, or the other way you can remember it, by not letting your opponent's king go ahead of its pawn. For example, if black plays anything else, suppose rook f2, then after king b6, black is lost. Rook b2 check, king c6, which is gonna lead us to another important pattern we should learn, important rule called a bridge. For example, if king is here even, we go king d6 and king c6, and now white is winning. They go rook h8 check, king e7, king c7. Now how does white win this? Black goes rook c1, c6, and black goes rook c2. How we gonna win it? What white does, goes rook h1 back, then goes rook to d1. So this way they cut the black's king off. After rook c2, they move the pawn as far as they can. Rook b2 check, king c8, rook c2, c7, and rook b2. Now the final stage. White has to win black's rook for a pawn, or in other words, to queen the pawn and force black to take it. How can white do that? White has to give rook e1 check, and after king f7, you see coming out with the king is not going to do any good for white. King c2, king c6, rook c2, and white's king cannot hide anywhere. So the move to play here, winning move, is rook to e4. This is very interesting move. Idea is to come up with a king. For example, if black goes rook b1, now coming out with a king is going to win the game. Rook d7 check, king c6, rook d6 check, king d6. And now you see, if black plays rook d1 check, then after king c5, rook c1 check, rook c4, white simply makes a queen and wins the game. Black has maybe last resource. White wants to play rook e5 and rook c5. Black has no defense. If black tries king f6, don't play rook e5, that's a trick, because rook takes c7 will draw here. But what you have to do is simply, instead of going rook e5, play rook e6 check first. And when king moves anywhere, either on f7 or f5, then you play rook e5, followed by rook c5. Same goes for king f5, rook e5 check, and rook c5, and white wins. Now this is called a bridge. After rook e4, bridge is white's king moving out to c5 and rook c4. That's the bridge. And that's what makes white's position won. Now those are the very basics of rook and pawn versus king. There are a couple of other positions that is very important to know. For example, here white's pawn on a7, white has one move to queen. However, they cut off on the b file, and black's king is cut off. So can white win here? The answer is no, because white's king is cut off on the E file. Black's king is cut off on the E file. In order for white to win, black's king has to be cut off on the F file. Now white wins. In this position, it's a draw. Oh, let's see why. If white goes rook h2, white has to put the rook on B file in order to come out with a king. Well, they have to go rook h8, king d7, rook h2, king d7, rook h8, king c6, and rook b6. But then black simply goes rook a1, and after rook b2, rook c1. White will never make a progress. Now white has to go rook h2 in order to give check. Black goes rook b1, and we are back to square A. So the different story is king is cut off on f7. Now white wins. Rook h2, king e7, rook h8, king d6 or d7, rook to b8. Now you see, no matter where black's rook moves, if black's rook go to h1, white simply comes out with a king. And king to d8. No, king to d8 is going to be checkmate. So, well, plays rook c1 check, king to d8, and now rook h1. Now this is winning for white. All they have to do is to give rook b6 check, and on king c5, probably simplest way to win, just go rook a6 and queening next move. Since check, we just go king d7, and after rook h1, rook a8, king c7. This is easy win. King b7, rook a1, and king to b7. Now, what if black's king went to d7 earlier, and now white plays rook b8 and black goes rook a1? How can white win here? They come king b7, rook b1 check, king a6. Now on rook a1 check, king b6, and on rook b1 check, king c5. And you see white queen's next move. And after rook b1 check, king a6, rook a1, there is no defense. After king b6, white is going to queen. Black loses rook and the game. So those positions are winning. So remember, king has to be cut off. It's going to be 4 squares between four files, 4 verticals between kings. Then side with an extra pawn wins the game. This is another important pawn versus rook and pawn versus a rook position. So every time you get an end game where there's a rook and one pawn versus rook, this position is definitely winning for extra pawn, for side who has an advantage, or it's definitely drawn. There is no maybes, or one side has advantage, or one side has chances to win. There is no such a thing. It's a definite win or definite draw. There is nothing in between. That regarding pawns, regarding endings where rook and pawn versus pair rook. We practically covered all the rook endings where rook and pawn versus rook. But now let's get those endings. You have to know just like 1, 2, 3. But there are some basic principles of the rook endings, just like any other ending. So in rook ending, more than in any other ending, those principles are essential. Number one rule: never play with the passive rook. Do not have a passive rook. It's a lot better for you to play to be a pawn down than play with a passive rook that has only defensive option and can never move out. This is rule number one. Rule number two, also extremely important, but the rule number two is very basic, with very similar to the any ending, pawn ending or rook ending or queen ending. Or this is the rule about the active king. Absolutely be active with the king. But rule number two, do not have passive rook, have an active rook. And rule number two, activate your king. Here is a good example. Now, white has an extra pawn. This endgame is absolutely winning for white. Now, how can white win? If white pushes the pawn h6, rook e1 check, king e2, rook h1, it's not clear that white can win, and I will say even more, it's probable a draw. This is a draw. After rook g6, we don't want to analyze this game. Black may go a5, then b6, then king a6. It's very hard for white to make a progress, because if king marches towards the pass pawn, then black may take two of white's pawns and have pass pawns on their own. However, the position is easily won for white. The easy win, remember, we already discussed that it's extremely important to have an active rook, which also means it's extremely important not to have passive rook. So you do one or the other, which looks like the same rule. One means either you have yourself extremely active rook or force your opponent to have extremely passive rook. And the answer is to rook g1. To this is rook g1. Now what white wants to do to play next move, regardless what black does, is the rook to h1, followed by h6 and h7. Black eventually has to stop the h pawn. Black goes rook h7, we go rook h1, and even if they go rook h6. Okay, this is the position I was talking about. Our rook may be not as active, but it's a lot more active than black's rook. Black's rook cannot have any moves. What if black's rook moves anywhere, white pushes the h pawn. All on king b6, king c2, king c5, king d3, king d5. Now, what can white do? White can go something like a4, and black cannot go towards the pawn because white will go towards pawns on queen side. And if black goes b6, we go b4. Now, if black goes b5, we take, he takes. And do we have an opposition here? Yes, we do. But guess what? It's opposition only for black. White has many moves. White can go rook h1, rook h2, and win opposition this way. For example, king e5, king e3. Now on king f5, white is going to go king d4, and on king d5, white is going to go rook h4. You see, black has to come back to king e5. Now we have to make another opposition. So we go rook h3, king d5, and rook h2. So we could have gone on king d5 immediately, rook h2. Here is the trick. if black goes king c4, then white goes rook h4 check, and after king c3, king f4. Now you can tell that black cannot play king takes b4 because of king g5 check, so black loses. White goes king g5 next move. So what we did here, and if black goes rook takes h5, they lose after rook takes h5, king takes b4, king e3, and on king c4, king d2, and you see white's king makes back in front of the b pawn, and white wins very easily. So all this was possible because of the very passive position of black's rook. Well, once white played in this position, rook g1 and rook h1, black is lost. Well, why rook g1? Why not rook g2? Rook g2 does not do the same because black has the check. King c2 and rook a1. Now black is going to have an active rook, and white is going to have a passive rook defending. Now black's rook is behind the opponent's pawn, and white cannot win this. But this is like the next chapter, why white cannot win. So this is very important. When your opponent has pass pawn, keep your rook behind your opponent's pawn, not in front, because that's what makes your rook very passive. Once your rook is behind, it's active rook, and when you have a pass pawn, try to not let it happen. Try to have your rook behind your pawn. That's when you have good winning chances, and most probably the winning position. Now we're going to look at different type of rook ending. Rook endings have quite a bit different rules from pawn endings and from majority of other endings. For example, if we say in pawn endings it's good to have pawns on opposite sides of the board, like which will give you the outside pass pawn, that's completely different with rook endings. In rook endings, it's very important to have two connected pass pawns. Well, like in this case, in this example, right now on the board, we have either side has two connected pass pawns. And it's a simple logic here. When two connected pass pawns are very strong, they definitely gonna queen, and they are unstoppable. That means both sides gonna succeed fighting against the rook. But this position, how can we assess this position? When both sides have two connected pass pawn, I would assess as definitely and easily winning for black. Because if both sides gonna succeed moving the pass pawn, then one of the sides is way ahead. Black is ahead of white. If black is ahead of white just a little bit, there will be no draw. There's a definite win. And here's a simple example. Even if it's white's move, g4, b5, king g3, b4, h4, b3, or even king b5, g5, a4, king g4, b3. Now black may be a little bit ahead, but this little bit is enough. b2, rook b1, a3, g6, king c4, and after king g5, a2. You see black is easily winning. I didn't calculate these consequences, but there is a rule. Two connected pass pawns are unstoppable. If they are unstoppable, that means they're gonna queen. If they are gonna queen, then side that is ahead is definitely gonna win the game. Now, let me show you a little different connected to pass pawns. Here is two connected pass pawns, and here is two connected pass pawns, and another pass pawn on the other side. Now, what about this position? The result is the same. Black is winning because extra pawn for white is totally meaningless. Black simply goes e5, e4, marches, and succeeds. What makes white's case even more difficult, that central pawns are very good, basically in a rook ending. If in pawn ending or bishop ending you want to have a rook pawn that moves quick, and it's good to have wing pawns, it's opposite in the rook ending. Rook ending central pawns are very strong, especially if they're connected. That's like a deadly power. Again, on g4, e5, king g3, we can go either e4 or d4. Now white's a pawn, it doesn't matter, rook cannot stop, so white is totally lost. On h4, king d5, h5, e4, king h4, e3, and white's rook cannot fight against black's pass pawns. Next move is going to be e2 and d3, and black is going to win easily. Extra pawn does not mean anything. So what means is the quality of the pawns you have and not the quantity. It's in rook ending. If we take this ending, we just take the rooks away, that you can tell that white is easily winning. King g3, d4, king f2, pawns can be stopped. One king does stop two connected pass pawns, but king and rook will never ever stop two connected pass pawn if they supported by the rook. So that's why it's very important. The central pawns are very important. Well, especially even if the other side has two extra pawns. You see, after e5, white still has big advantage, because even though they are two pawns down, they are in a lot of trouble, because there's two. You need only one pawn to queen, but they are too far, and these two pawns, central two pawns on e5 and d5 are unstoppable power, and black is absolutely winning. Those are the rules, are very important to remember. In rook ending, activity of the king, especially if you have two connected pass pawns, central pawns are very good, better than outside pawns. In most of the cases, of course, we can just compose the position where the outside pawn may be better, but it's very rare. As a general rule, central pawn is a very strong pawn, and central connected two pawns, pass pawns, are extremely powerful force. So that's what I wanted to show about the connected power of connected pass pawns. Two connected pass pawns are deadly, especially in rook endings, because there is no possibility of blockade. So that's another important rule for rook endings. But there are some positions that are exceptions from the main rules. For example, here's one position we have right in front of us, where white does have two connected pass pawns, but white cannot win this position. And the reason is because king cannot help. When I said that two connected pass pawns in rook ending cannot be stopped, I meant, of course, with the support of the king. here white's king cannot help those white pawns, and rook must protect the backward pawn. So white has no way of making progress without losing both pawns. So if white goes back, black goes with a rook on d file, and there is absolutely no way white can do anything in this position. There are some other odd positions in a rook ending. There are some positions where, well, here is one position where where one side has two extra pawns. Here is an interesting position. One side has two extra pawns. White goes that way. Goes about a pawn on 7th rank. Can white win this position? No. The reason why not, because black stays with rook on a file, and g pawn is not going anywhere, and white's king cannot help. If white king marches towards the a pawn, as soon as white king protects the b pawn, and then the white is ready to move the rook, black starts checking until king goes away from the pass pawn. Then black goes back rook a1, and you see it's a draw. This is an interesting position. Very, very interesting position. And let me tell you something else. Why it's so important to know endgame's basic principles and main key positions of the endgame. You must know very well, in order to play rook ending well, you must know very well pawn endings, because rook endings have tendency to transferring into pawn endings. Well, let me give you one interesting example. Here is the position. White has an extra pawn, and it's white to move. White has only one way to win this endgame. Now remember, if rooks are exchanged in this position, white is winning, because white is going to come eventually win black's pawn, and opposition is not going to help black, because we learned it in a chapter of pawn endings. Opposition is not going to help black because they are on a back rank. Back rank is exception. No matter whose move is it, white wins. So based on that, so we know that in this rook ending, you see, by playing rook ending, you must know the pawn ending. So you must know the theory of the pawn endgame that you want to get. The endgame is going to be winning. So all you need to do to give the a pawn and exchange rooks. Now, there are three ways to do that. To play rook c8, and when black takes, play rook c7, exchange rooks. Rook d8, and when black exchange rook d7, check. And rook to e8, to take and exchange rook e7, check. Now, but which one of them is the right way to play? There is only one move that wins this rook ending. This is kind of trick question. Which move wins? The move that wins here, one that guarantees the exchange of rooks. And this is the only move that guarantees exchange of rooks. After rook d8 or rook e8, it's a draw, because black is not going to play rook takes pawn. Black is going to play rook a6 check first. And when king moves anywhere, then black rook is going to take the pawn. Rooks cannot be exchanged, and therefore it's a draw. Different story on rook c8, because if black plays rook a6, white goes rook c6. They maintain king position on d6. If black takes, white is going to exchange rooks. And if black goes rook away, then white is going to give one check, then another check, and then make a queen and win the game. So those are kind of tactical nuances of the position and some tactical subtleties. There are a few others. Rook ending may be interesting. There are some tactical shots in the end games. You can see them over and over and over. Well, let me show you one tricky position that happened between two strong grandmasters. And here, one of the grandmasters was totally winning. Well, here, the grandmaster was playing with black. Black is coming this way. Played a2 move. And it looks like an easy win, because if white takes, black gives check, then another check on h2, and then takes the rook. But here is what happened. White in this position played rook takes a2, and now it's a draw. On a check, white goes king e2, and then rook h2 check goes king d3 back, and black cannot take the rook because it's a stalemate. Stalemate, and unless black takes this rook, there is no way black can win this position. It's a theoretical draw. So that's what happens. So you have to be very careful. There are some cheap tricks, and there are some interesting tactical shots you have to be aware of, but we cannot cover all of this now on this lecture. So I went through the basic principles and few of the exceptions. So that will conclude our chapter on